Good evening, everyone. I want to be really respectful of everyone's time, so we're going to go ahead and get started if you don't mind. My name is Jack Hagerman. I'm the CEO of the Santa Fe Animal Shelter. I've met a lot of you, and I would love to meet all of you when you have some time. And I will try and speak as loudly as I can so that everyone can hear me. If I start to speak lower, please just go like this. And I'll try and speak as loudly as I can. I'd like to introduce Richard Eeds, who you probably already all know from the radio. Richard is a really good friend of the shelter, and he interviewed me a few weeks ago on the radio, and I was so impressed with how well he was like keeping me in line with time, that when we decided to do a meeting with all of you, I was like, well, this could go on for hours if I don't have someone who can kind of keep us on time. So Richard is going to be our moderator for the evening. But before we get started, I just want to kind of set the stage for kind of the last few years of our life at the shelter. Beginning in 2020, the shelter was pretty much in a state of crisis, and that crisis did not stop. We started to see record number admissions to the shelter. When I got here in 2021, we were in a situation where we had animals doubled up, sometimes tripled up in kennels. We were having to house them in some spaces that were inhumane housing. It was what we would call a dumpster fire. It was really, really tragic. And so towards the end of last year, we had gotten so full and our employees had gotten so demoralized and overworked and burned out that we had to do something pretty drastic to kind of reset where we were so that we could provide humane care to the animals. So for a period of time at the end of the year last year, we had to stop all owner surrenders to the shelter simply because we did not have a kennel to put them in. And that occurred for a period of probably about 3 months. And during that 3 months, a lot of folks in the community were really confused that they were wanting to surrender pets and we weren't letting them. And so a lot of negative stuff went out into the media saying the shelter has closed its doors, and which is not actually true because we are an open admission shelter with animal control contracts with the city and county, which means we have to accept every animal from this community regardless of age, breed, size, or any other criteria. So animal control is bringing in stray and ill animals every single day. And so we had to cut off owner surrenders because we couldn't cut off that. So for a period of time, we couldn't do any owner surrenders, and that started sort of this chain reaction of negative media out there and confusion and misinformation. So I think we're in a much better place now. We've been able to manage our numbers in a much better way. We're providing more humane care to the animals. We're getting them out of here faster. Our euthanasia rate is better. So there's a lot of good news. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the misinformation that's been out in the media has really dragged that, like it's really overshadowed all of the good news. So tonight we're going to talk, we asked for a lot of you to submit your questions ahead of time, just so that we could keep this really organized. Richard's going to read those questions. I will answer them. And then if we have time at the end, I will open it up to all of you to ask any questions that you might have. But I want to be sensitive to the time period that we set for an hour. If we need to go over a little bit, I'm happy to do that. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I'm happy to do that as well. But we do want to try and keep this really contained to an hour if at all possible. And we're also going to commit to doing these meetings every quarter going forward, because there is so much changing in our world and in the field of animal welfare. And we want to make sure that we're being really transparent with you about how we are making the decisions that we're making and the data and research and best practice that is informing those decisions. We want to be a learning organization. And so what that's going to mean for us is that we're going to try some things out. We're going to pilot some things and we're going to see how it works for this community. And when something doesn't work, we're going to pivot. That's just the nature of the business that we have to be in. And the world is a really challenging place to be right now. So we're doing the very best that we can to care for the animals of this community. So with that, I will turn it over to Richard.
All right. So the idea is Jack will answer all the questions that were pre-submitted, and then when we have time, we can grill them with really, really tough questions after that. Are you ready?
I'm ready. And actually, one more thing.
Oh,
So all the people sitting behind me are folks on my management team, and I asked them to be present just in case there is something that I miss. These are really subject matter experts, so they're kind of going to jump in if there's something that I miss, or if there's a data point that I can't remember. That's what they're here for. Sure.
I'm Pamela Louise Powell. I'm the Director of Philanthropy, which means I'm over development, fundraising, marketing, and communications.
Most of you know me. I'm Tony Waswitz. I'm the volunteer coordinator. I'm the one who sends you the emails and does some trainings with dogs. And great to see you. Thanks for coming here tonight. Appreciate it.
I'm Michelle Aceves, and I'm the Director of Veterinary Operations.
I'm Sarah Muriello. I'm the Director of Project Management.
I'm the other Sarah Fitzpatrick. I'm the Community Engagement Manager, overseeing the teams that facilitate fostering and volunteering.
I'm Dylan Moore, Senior Director of Shelter Operations. So I oversee pretty much everything that touches an animal that isn't medical.
All right.
So a couple of weeks ago, Jack came in. We do Pet of the Week every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, and we took phone calls and questions from people concerned about all the stuff that was in the media, and 100% of it was about cats. So we'll start with cats. Could a cat be brought in and neutered and then returned to the neighborhood where it was found? Could we have free or sliding scale neutering available?
Yes. Yes, you can. So we do have TNR services available to the community free of charge. So any member of the community can trap a cat and bring it to our satellite clinic on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays before 10 a.m. And they do have to be in a trap. We can't bring in feral cats in cat carriers because that's dangerous. So if you don't have a trap and you need one, we can lend one to you. And the city also lends them out as well. So if you don't have a trap and you need one, just contact us and we'll make sure that you can get it.
TNR is trap, neuter, return?
Yes.
Okay. Do you intend to bring TNR back? If so, will require hiring? Is there or will there be a job posting on SFAS website? I believe grant opportunities for spay neuter for TNR occur in the fall. Will there be someone on the SFAS staff working on grants for this project in 2023? And will there be consideration of having volunteers assist with TNR coordinator? In the 7 years I have been a volunteer, there have not been opportunities to assist in TNR.
That is a lot of questions. So let's try and get through all of them. So, so we never actually stopped doing TNR in our community. What changed shortly after I got here was the grant funding that we had that paid for the coordinator position that we had ran out. At the same time, that coordinator announced that she was retiring, and we also lost another veterinarian who was retiring, who was doing all of our TNR spay neuter and public spay neuter. So at that point in time, we did not have anyone to do the surgery, we did not have anyone to do the trapping, and we did not have any funding to support that. But if people from the community brought us cats, we were still able to do that. A little later in the year, we were able to attract another high volume surgeon who now works for us 3 days a week. So we were able to start doing those services again as the community brought us those cats. But we never actually stopped doing it.
Is that going to require hiring?
I think at this stage, what we're going to be asking is for your help, the community's help in the T and the R part. We can do the N. We actually have surgical capacity now to be able to do more surgeries in the community, but we're going to have to partner with the community to do the trapping and the returning. And so we actually have our volunteer, Marianne Ryan, who's amazing, if you all don't know her. She's going to be doing an in-service on how to trap cats on what day? August 19th. So we can definitely get you information on that if you want. Oh, there's a flyer on the back table.
That answers the last part about can volunteers assist in this, because they would do the team there. Okay. You ready?
Yep.
In my understanding that animal control will not pick up healthy trapped outdoor cats. If a member of the public traps a free roaming cat, can they bring it to the shelter for free spay neuter surgery and then take it back to where they found it, how is that coordinated, arranged?
Yes, the answer is yes. And like I said, you can bring a trapped cat in Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays to our satellite clinic before 10 a.m.
Okay. If a community cat, adult or kitten, from a colony is people friendly, why not bring it to the shelter to make sure that it's spayed or neutered and then put it up for adoption? If a people friendly cat was found roaming around an apartment complex for over a week, would you return the cat to the apartment complex? It could be listed under lost and found for a bit to make sure it doesn't already have a home. Left on their own, there's always the danger of being killed by a coyote, owls, cars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Need access to food, water, and shelter. Be nice to not have so few cats offered for adoption as has been the case for all of 2023. Whew. Community
Okay.
cat wandering around an apartment building.
So if a cat is social, that is not by accident. That means that someone loved that cat and socialized it. And by removing it from where it lives, we may be unintentionally taking that cat away from the family or community that loves it. So, and there's a lot of data and science to back this up. This has been the way that community cat programs have functioned throughout this country for many, many years now. And so what the research and science tells us is that cats are not social by accident. And so we don't want to unintentionally take that cat from the home that it knows, that it is well adapted to. And if it's well adapted to the outdoor environment that it lives in, that means that it knows where all the hiding spots are. It knows the natural predators of the neighborhood. So it is well adapted to manage that. Obviously, if it's grown up in that neighborhood and is healthy and is social, there's a reason. So we're just not wanting to take those cats away from the people who love them in the communities that they know.
Okay, that ends the cat questions. Why are so many kennels and adoptions empty, and why aren't more shy, fearful dogs given kennel mates?
So to the first part of that question, there's a row in the adoptions kennels that we are unable to use right now because the air conditioning does not work in those kennels, which makes them inhumane to be in for any period of time. What was the second part of that question?
Why are not the more fearful dogs given the kennel mate?
So our behavior team is working every day to match up animals to be paired up. And we're constantly looking at that. But it's also worth noting that not every shy dog can tolerate being with another dog. So part of what we're trying to do now, and I think what we've always done, is try to look at each animal as an individual and look at their individual needs and match them up with another animal if that is the most appropriate thing to do. And if it's not the most appropriate thing to do, then we want to put together a care plan to provide the level of enrichment that that animal will need to be able to survive the trauma of being in a shelter.
All right, a question about your favorite program. How is the funding for the CASA program? Sounds like a great program.
It is a great program. If you don't know about the CASA program, CASA is Community Assistance for Santa Fe Animals, and it's a safety net program that the organization did not have until 2022. We launched it in early 2022, and basically what it is what we've learned through research. 75% of the time, people who have to surrender a pet to a shelter are not doing so because they've fallen out of love with their pet. They are usually doing it because they're experiencing some sort of acute resource issue. So this program aims to help people through crisis times so that we don't have to separate them from their pet. So if someone has lost their job and they're having trouble affording food, we can enter them into our food bank so that we can provide food for them. If they've been hit with an expensive veterinary cost that they can't afford, it's cheaper for us to help them with that expense than to separate them from their family, right? So CASA resources are really intended to keep families together. And we're very fortunate that when we launched the program, we were able to raise a significant amount of money to support it. And we're continually adapting the program to meet the needs of the community. Because like I said, when you launch a new program or when you change a service for the community, you have to pay attention to the community that you're serving. So we're constantly evolving this program to meet the needs of the community as they're coming at us. And as they're telling us what they need, we're adapting the resources that we can provide to help them. But we're always looking to improve it, increase it, provide more resources, because the idea here is to keep animals with the people that love them.
And I think we had a puppy brought in yesterday. Brian brought in a little guy named Silver yesterday who had to be given up, right? The owner had to give him up. And he got a home today, right? Got adopted today. Why don't dogs in RRC get more yard time? 2 walks a day, longer walks. All the shelter dogs need a longer time out of their kennels, longer walks, and at least 2 walks a day. The second walking shift may officially end at 5 p.m., but is often completed by 4 p.m., and the dogs are stuck in their kennels until 8, 9, or 10 a.m. the next morning, depending on availability of staff and volunteer walkers. That is too long in a box.
I absolutely agree with that. That is absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons why you've probably noticed that we've been doing a lot of campaigning to bring on more dog walking volunteers, because we believe that getting dogs out of the kennel is important. Now, we also believe that getting the dogs out of the kennel is not the only thing that is going to be enrichment for that animal. So we're also working on, again, going back to this idea of looking at each animal as an individual, looking at their unique individual needs, and determining whether or not more enrichment in the kennel is more important for that animal, or if more enrichment out of the kennel is important for that animal. One of the things that's going to be a challenge for us in the next probably month or so is the heat. So we probably won't be doing a lot of dog walking in the afternoons when the sun is the hottest, because the dogs don't like it and the people walking them don't like it. So we're trying to figure out more creative ways to provide enrichment in the kennel during those hot periods of time. But we really do need your help in recruiting as many dog walking volunteers as we can, because that's an important point to make. We want to give as much enrichment to the animals as we can while they're in our care.
All right. Why are you turning away animals when the shelter has so many employees and volunteers and such large, nice facilities instead of being willing to take them? Not only are you shaming people who are bringing in animals, you are putting increased stress on the other small rescues in the area.
Well, I guess the first point is we are not turning away animals. We do not turn away animals. That is not something that we do. Like I said earlier, there was a brief period of time at the end of last year when we had to stop owner surrenders because we literally did not have the room for them. And I think that was the moment in time that created this impression that we had closed our doors. But the reality was we were still accepting animals through animal control, and that never stopped and it never will stop. And we are accepting owner surrenders now. The difference now is that when someone calls us to surrender a pet, it used to be we would take them, no questions asked, right? Now, the only difference in the owner surrender process is now we have a conversation. We talk to them about the reasons why they have to surrender their pet, and we ask them the question, if you could keep them, would you? And if we can help you to keep them, let's do that. Right? So that's the only thing about the owner surrender process that's really dramatically changed, because we're giving people more agency in the decision-making process to determine whether or not it's appropriate to surrender their pet to the shelter. Because what we know, and as you all know, the shelter is a really miserable place for animals. So we want to try and mitigate as much as we can and provide solutions outside of the shelter so that they never have to experience the trauma of being here, right? So we're trying to provide more resources, more solutions outside of the shelter, because that's in the best interest of the family and, most importantly, the animal. We are doing our very best to operate within our capacity. And you've probably heard the term capacity for care. And that capacity for care is a sheltering model developed by UC Davis that borrows a lot of cues from the healthcare world And the idea is that every shelter, just like every hospital, has a maximum capacity to care. And when you exceed that capacity, the standard of care that you provide degrades significantly. And so when we are operating so far above our capacity that the level of care that we're providing becomes inhumane, that becomes a real big issue. And the reason it becomes a real big issue, aside from the fact that it's inhumane, is that those animals end up having to sit longer. They have to stay here longer until we can get to them to give them the care and enrichment that they need. And the longer they're here, the more their personalities tend to change, right? So if we can manage the influx of animals to a reasonable level within our capacity, what ends up happening is the standard of our care goes way up. And when the standard of our care goes way up, the animal is able to demonstrate natural behavior, which makes them more marketable, which gets them adopted faster, and with a lot less trauma, right? So when we say we want to operate within our capacity, that's really what we're trying to say. Now, having said that, it's pretty safe to say that we are never operating within our capacity. We have never operated within our capacity because the community need is much more significant. What we are trying to do now is to bring that down a little bit so that we can see outcomes faster. And what we have seen since we started this is that we are seeing animals stay less time. We're seeing our more problematic animals get out of here much, much faster. Why? Because we're able to dedicate a lot more time to helping them get out of the shelter. We're able to dedicate more time to marketing them. We're able to dedicate more time to enrichment. So operating within our capacity is the most humane thing to do, and we try to operate within it as much as we can.
When will the air conditioning be fixed in the adoptions building?
Oh, Lord. Yes, we are working on this. It has been a much slower process than we were hoping, and that is primarily because of a horrible workforce shortage. So when we started reaching out to vendors to get estimates to fix or replace our HVAC system, it took us 9 months to get someone to call us back. And so we have finally a contract with a company who is going to be completely replacing the HVAC system in the adoptions building and the Animal Resource Center building. So it's coming. Thank God it's coming. It has been a really tough couple of years because the problem is, even though our building is only about 20 years old, this organization has been in financial crisis for so long that there is dramatic deferred maintenance, which means we were not adequately maintaining the HVAC system when it was originally installed. And so problems kept mounting until we got to a point where there were catastrophic failures. And now we're at a point where we have to completely replace it. We have committed to going forward, making sure that we appropriately budget for regular maintenance of our building and all of the things that need to make the building function and manage the temperatures in the building, all of the things.
It is commonly known that among rescue organizations and animal welfare groups, that dogs should not be listed on Craigslist or any other avenue for free. Yes, Santa Fe Animal Shelter offers fee-waived adoptions almost monthly. The reason for this is that it provides an invitation for dog fighting rings and even people wanting to make money by selling dogs elsewhere.
It's actually quite the opposite. There is virtually no evidence to support that waiving adoption fees puts animals in danger of any of those things. There is, however, a lot of data to support that what people pay for an animal says nothing about the level of love and care that they provide for that animal, right? So we really have to change our thinking on this. We are doing our best as an organization to trust the people of our community to make good decisions. The price of an animal, and this is best practice across the country now, we are trying, as a shelter community, we are trying to remove as many barriers to placement for animals as possible. And cost, whether we want to believe it or not, is a barrier. And it says nothing about how much someone loves an animal.
The Santa Fe Animal Shelter is not a closed system. Policies enacted here have impacts in other shelters in the area. Can you describe these impacts and how you plan to respond as a colleague of other nearby shelter directors?
Here's what I can say about us. We are informing our decision-making on nationwide best practice, and we are trying to implement those changes in a way that makes sense for this community. And we're going to pilot a lot of things. We're going to miss the mark sometimes, and we're going to pivot. I can't speak to why shelters surrounding us choose not to do those things. So I also can't speak to the admission issues that they're having. And I have seen no data to support that our following best practice is having any negative impact on them. The only thing that I've heard is anecdotes. And I don't have the luxury of using anecdotes to inform my policy. We have to do what is best for animals in our community. We have to provide humane care for the animals in our care. Period.
How is Espanola Shelter able to provide free spay and neuter clinics, yet Santa Fe Animal Shelter has increased the cost of this? What is SFAS doing to help recruit veterinarians for spay and neuter services? Seems this would be a first priority to alleviate further costs and burdens of the shelter. Maybe a partnership with Espanola Shelter or other rescue organizations could be formed specifically for spay and neuter services.
So Espanola is able to provide free spay neuter to its community because it has a single donor who pays for all of it. We do not. So we have to cover our costs somehow. And unless we can find a major donor, and if you know one, please send them my way. Spay and neuter is expensive. Those costs are going up. Medical supplies are going up. We saw a 15% increase in all medical supplies last year. So the reality is it's dollars and cents, and we don't have a major donor to help incur those costs for us. Now, having said that, Bridget at Espanola and I worked together on, she had some open capacity in her community because they had done such a good job of doing spay and neuter in their community that they were finding that they had some open appointment slots. And we made an agreement that if she opened up her service area to include Santa Fe County, that we could refer, when we couldn't get clients into our clinic, that we could refer them to them, and they were able to do that. That's a partnership that is still in place today. And I'm really grateful to them for that. Because part of the issue that we have here, we've been very successful, fortunately, knock on wood, it stays that way. We have been very successful at recruiting veterinarians for Thaw Hospital, which is our primary vet care hospital. But those are a very different breed of vet. Those vets are general practice veterinarians. High volume spay-neuter surgery is a specialty. Just like in human healthcare, there are specialties. There's cardiologists, there's orthopedists. In the field of animal welfare, high volume spay-neuter surgery is a specific vocation that surgeons go specifically for. Unfortunately, in our country right now, there is a massive shortage of people who do that specialty. If you look at the job boards for veterinarians anywhere in this country, quite literally every single shelter in this country has an open position or several open positions for high volume surgeons. We are all competing for a very small pool of people. And the problem that we have here in Santa Fe is that this is a very expensive place to live. We have a housing shortage. And our school systems are challenged. So this is a difficult market to recruit to. So we have some cards stacked against us, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to stop trying to actively recruit. It's just a really challenging thing in this moment in time.
All right. Will Santa Fe Animal Shelter consider sharing the studies they are basing these policy changes on? I think it would be helpful to at least have a citation list for those of us who are interested.
Yes, absolutely. So we actually, if you go to our website on our homepage, there is a link to a section of our website now for position statements that gives you the why of our decision making and supplements it with all of the data and science that helped to inform those decisions. So you can go straight to where the research comes from. It's all available on our website. Did I miss anything?
I understand that you have a deep understanding of best practice shelter policies, but as a scientist, I also know that even best practices in any field do not necessarily generalize to new circumstances. What have you done to assess the local costs and benefits of the new policies you have implemented, however good your intentions, and through what process will you make necessary adjustments?
So I am a big fan of piloting things. So we use best practice to inform our decision making, but the reality is every community is different. So how you execute a best practice might be different from one community to the next. The only way for us to know that, though, is to test it out. So we're testing out a lot of things right now, and we're pivoting as we need to support the community in the way that the community indicates to us it needs, right? So yes, we are going to inform all of our policies based on national best practice. That's just the right thing to do. You wouldn't want to go to a hospital that did not inform its decisions on best practice. So I don't know why we would ever accept not using best practice for animals. Now, having said that, we do want to be mindful of the community's specific needs. That's why no policy that we implement is forever going to be the way that it is. We're going to test things out, and we're going to shift and change as the community shifts and changes with us. That's just the right thing to do.
Why not allow people 30 days to return an animal they've adopted? Sometimes people make emotional decisions about adoptions and then are faced with the equally emotional decision to return an animal.
So we do actually accept animals back when someone adopts a pet and it doesn't work out, it doesn't end up being a good match. We will bring those animals back in. The only thing that's really changed in that process is that now we're actually having a conversation about it. We're going to try and see if there's anything that we can do to help make that match make more sense. And we're going to help you with additional resources to kind of help you have more agency in figuring out the best pathway for that animal outside of the shelter, if it's at all possible. But if the best thing for that animal is to come back here, we're going to take it.
I think it's important to note also that there are emergent cases that happen, right? An animal bites, somebody ends up being terrified of the animal. Those are cases that are really obvious to us, and that animal would be accepted right back. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that our staff really, really work hard to make sure that animals who need shelter intake and have no other options get that intake.
And I think you're seeing sort of a theme here, right? Like the theme here is that we are looking at every animal as an individual, right? And we are looking at every family's circumstance individually. And we're trying to bring the best decisions for that individual case.
All righty, you ready for the best one?
Sure.
I don't know if it is or not. Why won't you at least consider the opinion of the people that live in Santa Fe?
I have always been willing to talk to people about whatever their concerns are, and that won't change. I think I do take accountability for not finding more creative ways to get our messages out in more ways and more audiences, right? We have to communicate better with our community so that they don't get all confused by all the misinformation that's out there. So we are committing to communicating more. That's why we're doing this today, and we're going to be doing a lot more of this in the future. And I'm constantly doing presentations out in the community where I invite feedback and questions and conversations. So yeah, I'm totally open. I think we have to be careful about what we mean when we say community, right? And I want to be careful to make sure that I am listening to the whole of our community, not just the loudest, most privileged voices in the room. The median income in Santa Fe County is $64,000, and Santa Fe City, $40,000. And the poverty rate is 12.3% in Santa Fe County and 13% in the city. So yeah, we're listening, but we're not just listening to the privileged folks with the loudest voices, right? The community that we are actually serving is quite diverse. And a lot of those folks don't necessarily have a subscription to a newspaper or even have internet access or speak English. So when we say, are we listening to the community? Yes, I am listening to the community. I am listening to the whole of the community. I think we all need to do that.
I think it's important to note that a lot of people don't even know what an animal shelter is, or what it does, or who it's for, or how it can help. There might be apprehension in even approaching a service organization like that on a lot of people's part. Each one of our policies at its heart has the individual strengths and needs of each individual community member. And we're trying to be cognizant of the ones we might not have considered in the past. Like going back to the community cat policy. Once a cat comes into the shelter, its possibility of being returned to its owner diminishes to 2%. So we want to prevent catnapping cats. And we also want to acknowledge the traditional harm, the historical harm that structures like animal shelters have done to marginalized communities, and be cognizant of that harm and prevent that going forward.
And just to kind of ride the coattails of that just a little bit, there is a huge discrepancy in how people keep cats. And why that changes, there are a lot of variables. One of the most predictive variables is income. And I'll speak really bluntly. The lower your income, the more likely you are to have an indoor-outdoor cat. And indoor-outdoor cats are the ones that you see roaming your neighborhood, and well-meaning citizens say, that cat needs me to do something. I'm going to scoop that cat up and do something with it. It disproportionately affects a huge portion of our community to have that cat disappear. And we're trying to serve that part of the community. We're trying to be a resource for that part of the community. And really, we're trying to build bridges with communities that have not been well served by our organization, because by reaching those communities, we can, I hope, raise the standards of animal welfare across all of our service areas, Santa Fe City and County.
And it speaks to trust. You know, we want the community that we're serving to trust us. And if we are unintentionally robbing them of their beloved pets, because we have judgments about what a home should look like, that's something for us to think about.
Okay, ready? And to that point, what steps can be taken to achieve a positive press acknowledging the recent negative reporting, in particular local press and social media?
I think my approach with messaging is that we have to make sure that we are looking for as many opportunities as possible to clarify a lot of the misinformation that's out there. And then secondary to that, we have to really tell the story of what we're doing in as many ways, in as many formats, and in as many venues as possible. Because the reality is there's a lot of really wonderful things happening here. And I would argue that there are more wonderful things happening here than 2 years ago. I think the shelter that you have today is better than the shelter that you have had traditionally. And I want us to remember that. And I think from a media perspective, we have to do a better job of telling that story. And so we're really going to be looking at our social media and our marketing to make sure that we're getting as many of those positive stories out as possible to as many people as possible. Again, keeping in mind that we are serving a whole community, right? And we have to reach those folks as well. And we have to think of more creative ways to get our messages to them so that they can trust us.
And to that point, we are missing the bi-weekly newsletter. It was a great way to communicate new policies to volunteers, as well as share animal adoption information and follow-up stories. Please bring it back. It could help with serious communication gaps at all levels. When I started as a volunteer, it was a newsletter for staff and volunteers. Maybe it should be that way again.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think we're looking at that. And I think the challenge that we've had most recently is just simply staffing. We have a very small but powerful communications team who are responsible for a lot of things. So we're trying to figure out a way that we can bring back more communications to you. I don't know, Pamela, if you have any more.
Well, we've discussed a newsletter. We just don't have the manpower at this time. However, Sarah Fitzpatrick does send a volunteer newsletter out every week. On our social media, we do every day or every week when an animal gets adopted, you see those on social media. So it's not like we're keeping information from anybody. It's just the way that we're disseminating information is different. And it might be a change for a while because we don't have the manpower, and it's our department is being restructured in a lot of ways to make us more efficient at what we do. Instead of having one person doing 50,000 things, we want to have 6 people doing things really well. And one of those things that is suffering is that staff newsletter. However, you are getting it in different ways. It's being disseminated in different ways. And maybe you have to look at that, what that means.
And I just want to assure you, if you are Facebook phobic, like I am, you can still see those adoptions posts because they're set to public.
So you don't actually have to be on Facebook to see those posts if you want to. But I do hear this, right? Like I hear the concern and I hear the interest in getting that level of communication back. And I think we're going to constantly be looking at ways that we can do that.
When will your next community forum be, and will you still require written questions in advance? If so, why? Would you consider an open mic at least at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we are going to do these quarterly going forward. I think the reason that we decided to ask for questions ahead of time was simply just for time efficiency. We wanted to make sure that we could address as many issues that you were all curious about as possible. And we were afraid that if we just did an open mic situation that it would get very untenable very quickly. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to have that moment as soon as we get through these questions. So if you want to ask a question, you're certainly welcome to.
I'd like more understanding as to why the shelter, which is lacking funds, decides at times to take a very hard luck case with serious medical problems and pour so much time and money to heal them. Perhaps the money should be more evenly distributed.
Well, I think our mission is to care for animals. So when animals come in through animal control, oftentimes they're in pretty rough shape. And if we have the resources to be able to help them and heal them, it is the right thing to do. I don't know why we would ever not do that. And that's part of what makes this shelter so special in this community. I can safely say to you that most shelters across the country do not provide this level of care for shelter animals. What we have here is quite special. It's one of the reasons that I was attracted to this shelter, because we offer such a high standard of care for homeless and abandoned animals. A lot of shelters don't even bother. They don't have the money or the resources or the staff to deal with it, and we do. And that's a really beautiful thing. I don't know why we would ever want to change that.
All right. What is your response to the June 29th Hour View piece on the shelter published in the New Mexican?
I think my opinion on all of the letters to the editor in the New Mexican are that they are fraught with misinformation. And that's unfortunate. And I think we're doing the best that we can to communicate through it. And I think that's why we want your help. You are all the walking, talking billboards for this organization. So we want to make sure that you are armed with as much real information as possible so that when people are bringing up those things at cocktail parties, you can say, actually, wait a minute, what you heard is incorrect, right? And I think we live in a world now where as soon as you put something out into the universe, it becomes the truth. And that's just something that we're going to have to deal with. But I think that's why we as an organization have to commit to being so much more transparent when these types of things happen so that we can set the record straight when we have opportunities to.
The things that have happened in the social media space and news space here have been so demoralizing for staff. We're here because we love animals as much as you do. We're here because we're professionals. We're here because we have the expertise, because we have the education and the experience. And we know that we're doing right by animals. We may not have communicated that well. We may not have explained it well, but we know what we're doing is right. And we may not get it exactly right every time. We need a bit of grace from everyone as we pivot and pilot. But it has been incredibly demoralizing to be part of this organization and to come to work every day to save lives and to have people just completely demean everything that we've done and to have it based on such terrible misinformation. It's been exhausting. It's been probably the most stressful period of my professional career, and I've been in sheltering for over 10 years at this point. And I'm here still for the animals, and I'm here for all of these great people and for you as well. And I appreciate that each one of you showed up to hear us out. But that's my personal experience of what's been going on.
Yeah, I honor Sarah's vulnerability here, and we are vulnerable with each other quite often during the week. We have to be. We have to take good care of ourselves because we do feel pretty beat up. But I want to thank everybody for coming tonight because this is a level of engagement that we need. And we have seen some wonderful letters to the editor by a couple of people in the room here trying to set the record straight.
Thank you, Barbara.
And people. And as volunteers, you are empowered and asked to be ambassadors for our mission. And you all, a lot of you are doing that really, really beautifully. So thank you so much.
Getting back to the communication thing, and thank you all for being so vulnerable. I have tried to lead with grace. And part of that means that I have an assumption of goodwill in every interaction that I have. And sadly, that has not necessarily been reciprocated a lot in the media. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop being the person that I am and having the leadership style that I have. My door is always open. I don't have anything to hide, and I'm willing to talk to anyone if they're willing to talk to me. Part of the challenge with what's been said about us in the media is that none of those people, as much as they are shouting into the universe, have ever actually reached out to me. And when I've reached out to them, they have not they've not wanted to talk to me. And so I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. What we do here is important. And I have one ground rule when it comes to the people who come here to work every day. All I ask is that you operate with kindness. And that extends to all of the other organizations who work with us. I'm just asking for kindness. Our jobs are too hard to be beat up this way. And it's unfortunate, but I think where I do have to have some grace in that is that at the end of it all, when the thing that we all have in common, we may not disagree on tactics all the time, but the one thing that we can agree on is that we love animals. And what I hope is that we show up for each other with the same compassion that we show to animals. Sadly, that has not been happening a lot lately, and I hope that that changes. And I hope that if I continue to model this behavior, that it will start to rub off, and that the community will start to embrace the positive changes and the really good news of how we are caring for animals. Now, with that, your questions.
I don't have a question, but I just want to let you know that I am one, and I'm sure I'm one of many. I fully support everything that the animal shelter has done and will continue to do. I have been a leader of a couple of groups, and I can tell you, boards can be difficult, and things can change, and they will change. But this shelter is a shining example. Everywhere I go, when I go up north to work, and I'm telling you something, Santa Fe, when you get north of Santa Fe, it's a whole different world up there as a nurse when I go up on Sunday mornings. And I can see stuff up there. There are animals in need up there. I apologize for my voice. But one of the things that I have, and it really pissed me off, to be honest, about the rumors and the misinformation that was spread. That can be some of the most damaging stuff in any community that can happen, particularly when you have people who are dedicated to working with animals. We have a little girl, Princess Charlotte, all of you know about her, and we love her. I adopted her on the 25th of June. She is amazing. She runs the whole house. But I want you to know, I fully support you. But this issue of people who disagree with something, some of it is jealousy. Some of it is envy. So let's be aware of that, because it may not be you at all.
Thank you.
So people that bring in fat cats to get neutered at the clinic, do they need to make an appointment? Because I'm just investigating what happens if 50 people with cats show up.
It hasn't been our experience that anyone has showed up with 15 cats. But if it did, so no, you don't need an appointment to bring in a trapped cat for TNR. And if for whatever reason, a whole shebang full of feral cats showed up all in one day, we would have processes in place to be able to manage that. So if we need to hold them overnight to do surgery the next day, we can do that. So there are things that we can do to make sure that we can have the appropriate capacity to do those surgeries. But you don't need an appointment.
What is the rated capacity of the shelter?
To give you an idea, the shelter has been operating at anywhere from like 36 to 150% over its capacity for about at least a year.
More like 3.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be nice about it. That range for about a year. It was much higher in years prior, about 300% over capacity for care. And there's 3 different capacities we measure: capacity for care, adoption-driven capacity, and then your population balance, which is intakes to outcomes. And we've been operating over all 3 of those metrics for a very long time.
Forever.
But we're shrinking that gap. That gap is really shrinking.
So I just, I want to end by saying that what we do here quite literally could not happen without you people. Like, you give of your time freely, and you provide valuable enrichment to animals who are going through the roughest time of their life. That is a really noble, beautiful thing. So please, from my heart, thank you for coming here as much as you come here to take care of the animals in our care. It matters so much. It's what's helping us to have the amazing outcomes that we have. This is a very special shelter. I am in a cohort with a lot of executive directors from across the country, and I can safely say that what we do here is really unique. And it's because of you. So thank you. And please, I want to keep the lines of communication open. When I say that my door is open, I actually mean it. You can show up anytime. And some of you do. And I encourage it. I want you to. Like, if there's ever anything that is confusing or misunderstood, I am always happy to stop what I'm doing to talk to you about it. That will never change. So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being such advocates for the animals in our care. And I can't wait to see what's up next for us. Thank you all.